Just me, a place to be me, where you get to experience life. 'Cause life is a journey, not a guided tour. If you want the rainbow, you have to go through the rain.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. We are wrapping up this June month, honoring and representing and acknowledging fathers, men, mental health, and wellness for men and what that looks like. So, the last conversation and discussion that we're going to have with our professionals, our licensed professionals, Miss Shayla, Miss Denise, Miss Jasmine, and Miss Aaliyah. We're going to talk about men's mental health and mental wellness as it relates to the title and role of being fathers. And it can be fathers post-COVID, fathers who may have or may not have some unresolved trauma, and how they show up and how we expect them to show up and how we can support them showing up. So without further ado, thank you guys so much for joining us and returning. The first question that I have for our panelists is, how can men prioritize their own healing journey while still fulfilling their responsibilities as men?
Um, uh, I'd say self-care, taking care of themselves so they can take care of everybody else or their responsibilities. Making sure they're good first before anything, and then everything else will fall in place.
And what does self-care look like? And this could be for anybody. We talk a lot about self-care, but what is self-care?
I would say massages. I
Okay.
think massages are important just for body, mind. Uh, I think men should get massages once a month at least. Just take care of their body.
So yeah, one example is massages. Who else? Who else can identify what self-care is? Jasmine?
Yeah, self care is one of those blanket statements that we have kind of used. It sounds good. We think of all the cutesy things, but sometimes self care doesn't look so pretty. Sometimes it's kind of sitting with yourself, and spending time with yourself to recharge. Whether you're doing that inside or outside, taking walks, those types of things. If you have faith that you're into, spending time in prayer, reading, educating yourself, I think those can all look like self care as well.
Anybody else want to chime in about self-care?
And it's very interesting that you asked that question, Sasha, as it relates to what is self-care, because some of the self-care things that people do, people feel is wrong. And it's their self-care. So some people may feel like smoking marijuana is something that they use to help calm themselves down, but how the world view it, they can't really communicate with others, or because the world doesn't feel that's the right way to do self-care, it can steer their thinking. So what self-care is, actually it's depending on who you're talking to and what is it that they like to do. And the world has put such put labels on so many things that a lot of people feel they can't even communicate their self-care. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I have had clients that were very reluctant to let me know that they smoke marijuana for self-care because of how people see that as something unhealthy.
I do want to point out that, self-care is something that is very personal and unique to everybody. And it fluctuates depending on the stress and the situations that we have. And sometimes we can go through life, different situations happen, and sometimes the self-care things that we used to do are creating unhealthy distractions and aren't self-care anymore. And it can swing from one way to another. So sometimes our self-care things can be helpful, and then sometimes our self-care things can be detrimental, depending on if it's used excessively or demonstrated excessively. And everyone is different because we all go through different experiences in our lives. We go from being teenagers, we go from being, young adults, we go from being different roles within our companies or at our jobs, we go from being parents. So self-care looks different in different stages and phases of our life. And sometimes we have to reevaluate what self-care is really doing for that phase in our life, because it may mean that as a teenager, as an adolescent, my self-care was hanging out with my friends because I got a lot of energy from them. Now, at the age of 30 and older, I want to be by myself so I can regroup and think. Because too many people is just too many, and that's not self-care for me. So what self-care looks like fluctuates throughout different phases and stages of our life. So hanging out with the boys may be one thing that used to give you energy, give you life, but now sitting on the couch and doing Sunday football by yourself or with your girl is self-care. And that's okay. It looks different.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we're constantly changing and we should continue to reassess where we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my next question is for Ms. Shayla. How can men seek support from their partners, family members, or community resources to help them cope with challenges of parenting?
Well, one of the things in seeking support from family members, one, they got to have a family member that they can trust in seeking that support, because we all have family, but we do have some family that, that we have to draw the line with.
Boundaries.
But yeah, definitely a lot of boundaries in families. But just either observation or feeling like you can, if that's a trusted person within the family, within your community resources. I know a lot of men talk to other men at church if they're a part of, those type of organizations, and just communing with them and talking about fatherhood. I know there was one thing that used to happen definitely before a pandemic, where I know at my church, all the men would get together at least once a month for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And talk and have that sense of community with other men so that they could talk about relationships. They could talk about children. They could talk about, other God things with other men and feel secure within that environment. Because some places are just not trusted places. And just like how men have that whole community at the barbershop, where they go in and they talk about a whole bunch of stuff I would dare not want to hear. But they have that sense of community with each other and learn a lot of things about life and children and dating in those environments.
And I like that. I like what Ms. Shayla said also, because when they're in those type of environments, like the men's breakfast or certain places where they gather, they can really just take care of themselves, because if you really think about it, they have a whole lot of responsibilities they have to deal with day in, day out. So really them attempting or arranging spaces where they can just be them and not have to deal with the other responsibilities of life. They definitely need more spaces like that. Mm-hmm. Because that's where infidelity show up, because they don't have spaces like that. They steer off to something else, into some sort of fantasy world, because they just don't have that space where they can just be them.
Wanted to take this tape into the barbershop and do our recording in the barbershop. And it's funny, like because it's a safe place. And if you go into a barbershop, as soon as the woman enter, you can hear the silence for a second. And then it's like everybody's going to make an adjustment, and some out of respect, I'm going to do it. And then some like, I'm just going to still be me. That's not my girl. You should have told her to come up in here, because you know how we get down. And I even personally is hesitant to go to the barbershop. If my husband is not there, his barber lines my hair. I was like, I'm waiting in the car until he come, or when nobody's there, I can go in and get out, because that's not my space.
That's right.
And we try to own it and then get mad. And then we also put our spouse or boyfriend or in a uncomfortable position, because if one of his friends now look at you wrong because you're wearing something that look good to your husband, and they start talking about you, he like, hey, don't talk about my girl like that. But you shouldn't have walked in like that. And again, we're coming into, to me, that's their zone, and we're crossing the line. Let them have that freedom that we want them to have. And if that's how they get that wellness. But you mentioned something about the infidelity, and I wasn't going to say anything earlier, like self-care for some people. Hey, I feel good if I go sleep with some people. That's my release. That's my self-care. Not if you married to me, it ain't. So when you're looking at self-care in your relationship, it's boundaries that's around there. So that communication, what does self-care look like to you? And understand that from your partner. It might be stupid and, oh, that's just so dumb, but I need that. And if it doesn't line up with you, then maybe again, y'all should just be friends and don't try to move forward in a relationship, because whenever he needs a break, he can't get it because you don't like the way he gets it. So he'll never get his need met because of you. Not because of him, it's because of you. And now he wants to help you. So I'm going to shut down because that's a whole nother episode.
And I think that one thing that you guys have pointed out is the importance of modeling self-care and what that looks like. Because if you are a father or a male role model to a child, then you are essentially passing down how you take care of yourself to that child. So if you are taking care of yourself by doing maybe what the child sees or what other people see as self-destructive behaviors, either punching holes in the wall when you get upset, or if someone's trying to have a conversation with you, you storm out, or if self-care looks like maybe being uncontrolled with the amount of alcohol that you consume and showing that to your kids, then you kind of are perpetuating some of those unhealthy things as for our younger generation. So I would encourage individuals, not just men, but women as well. I would encourage individuals to be mindful of how you demonstrate your self-care in front of children and future generations, because how you deal with it is how they will essentially deal with it. Gone are the days where we say, do as I say, not as I do. I saw you do this. I saw my mom smoke. I tried smoking as an adult, as a teenager, and now we're looking at this issue of, okay, well, I need to go take a cigarette break. Why? Because I saw my mom do it. That was her self-care on the porch.
Miss Sasha, I want to say that is a wonderful point that you just point out. And I just said that to my, actually to my son who's 23. And I said, he's in a situation with the young lady and he wants her to level up and do more. And I said, well, you have to lead by example. I said, and she's not going to respond to anything that you said because you're not in a leadership role position. And it cannot be do as I say. It has to be, you have to lead, and leading means that you have to do what is necessary for yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
You have to follow through on your goals first. You have to get your mental health together first. You have to get your physical health together first. And once you start getting all of those and financial goals and things like that first, then people start to look and say, well, I think I want to follow.
Yep.
Correct. Right. That is an excellent point. Whenever people come in with relationship problems, that's the first thing I think. What are you doing? What are you exemplifying? What are you showing? You're right. You have to lead by example. You lead by what you're wanting to take place. But you can't do that if you don't know who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other recommendations that you would give to men trying to cope with the challenges of parenting? And I think I want to ask Ms. Jasmine this question because I've seen her work with a couple of different kids and families. What are some of the things that recommendations that you would give to men addressing the challenges of parenting and, again, measuring their own stuff, bringing it into their parenting tactics?
A great question that I feel like has so many answers. I think another big thing, with men and parenting is establishing those routines with realistic expectations. And so when I say that, I've seen men try to be Superman. You hear that all the time. You hear about moms being Superwoman, the dad is Superman, but honestly, we're not. Nobody's a superhero in that way. So you can't be everywhere at once. You can't do everything at once. And so I think men need to put down their cape a lot more that they carry and lay it down and stop trying to do everything. Because there's strength in being able to say when it's enough. There's strength in that. And so some examples for that is even just I think about some of the clients I see, and their routines are all over the place and they're stressed out. The one child has a therapy session at 4, the next child got soccer practice at 5. They got to go pick up dinner from McDonald's at 6. And then at 7, they might have to do something else. And so it leads to so much anxiety, so much stress, which throws the whole household off and affects their parenting style. So just optimizing your time, but also being realistic with what you can and can't do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Miss Denise or Miss Aaliyah, Miss Shayla, do you want to chime in?
I would say for fathers, so of course we have single dads as well, right? That might be trying to juggle all the things. But if you're a dad and you're in a relationship, it goes back to a little bit of prioritizing, communicating, like who's doing what in that role. And I think just seeking that support in the relationship, like, now that gender roles are a little less rigid, right? So who's the one that drops the kids off of school? Who's the one that picks them up? Who's the one that, sits and does homework or gets dinner ready? Like having those routines in place in a sense of who's doing this. And then that could change. Like for me in my household, we lay out our week, somewhere between Saturday and Sunday, like, okay, are you going to be gone this time? Who's doing this? And just compromising on who's doing what so that things happen. And that it's not on just one person to be responsible for doing all these things. It's not just for me to be cooking dinner, 7 days a week, but dad will pick up dinner on Wednesdays because I get off of work at 7, or, the kids, depending on their age, will make something for themselves, heat up leftovers or something. So just like Miss Jasmine saying, having realistic expectations, not putting too much on yourself, communicating, seeking support from others. It's a little bit of everything.
I definitely agree with both. One of the things I definitely believe in having consistency and order when it comes to a household. I have a blended household. So we had to really develop consistency and order and really communicate and understand who's better at what, who has gifts in this area, who has gifts in this area. If my gift is that I can rearrange the schedule, make the plans and put that all out, and then the partner does this, that, and the third, we have to understand that and not try to step over anyone's gift, because if you can't do it, if that's not your specialty, don't do it. And work within that and be okay with that. Because there are some things that I'm just not going to be good at, and I'm not even trying. I don't even want to try. Because I'm allowed you to operate in that specific area, and I'm not going to step over your toes. And so it is definitely that communication. It is definitely understanding understanding your partner. Who does this better? Does this partner pay bills on time better than you do? Well, then let them pay the bills on time. And give them the money and just keep it moving, so there's no lack within the household.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the last thing I would add would be sometimes we have to show children how we cope with things by just being there and walking through our ability to cope with things in front of them. So, example, I locked my keys in the car. Okay. It was a very old car. But I had my cousin with me and my younger cousin. And so I wanted to yell, cuss, fuss, scream, everything like that. But me showing that to my cousin, who happened to be in elementary school, would not have been healthy and conducive for what they would then begin to demonstrate with problem solving and regulating their emotions in the future. So again, sometimes just being there, I would encourage fathers and men. Sometimes it's okay just to be there in the house, even if you feel like you're not doing anything. Sometimes kids just need your presence. Your partner just needs your presence and what that looks like. It could just be you just relaxing. Oh, okay. Well, dad's sitting on the couch, or father figure sitting on the couch. I'm gonna go relax with him, because we don't always have to be doing something, and that's okay. Or yeah, I'm gonna play the game with him. And so leading by example, that's definitely important. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for this fabulous conversation. I'm excited. I definitely see a maybe an episode in the future where we get the panelists from May and we get the panelists from June, and we all come together with a little muffins for moms and donuts for dad type of situation, and we have a great conversation, kind of continuing this verbatim, this dialogue with women's mental health, men's mental health, and what that looks like for the overall family dynamic and family structure and community wellness. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and joining, listening to us. And until next time, take care of yourself so that we can take care of each other. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Just Me Therapy podcast. If you are seeking further one-on-one diagnoses, interventions, and treatment plans, please consider scheduling an appointment with an individual counselor at Journeys Counseling Center, located in Greensboro, North Carolina. Journeys can be reached at 336-294-1349. The mission of Just Me Therapy podcast is to use authentic conversations to uplift one's mind, body, and soul. The goal of Just Me Therapy is to offer affordable education and insight to individuals who experience financial barriers to accessing individualized behavioral health care services. With that being said, the information, including opinions, advice, and recommendations discussed in this podcast, are intended for individual, informational, and educational purposes only. Such information is not intended to substitute the recommendations of your own licensed therapist or healthcare professional. Although we are licensed behavioral health professionals, we are not your licensed behavioral health professional. As a result, the advice mentioned on this podcast should not replace the recommendations offered by your own qualified health professional.